Hello there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. In one of our recent videos, one of our commenters, Rixland, asked the following question. How does hyperspace surveying work? Well, that's a terrific question because hyperspace lanes are very much like the highway systems for the entire galaxy. Commerce, culture, and civilization spread along its arteries, creating value and connecting everyone together. Expanding this transportation network is more important to the Republic than maintaining its relationship with the Jedi or creating massive naval fleets. And that is because the Galactic Republic's strength didn't come from its military power or religious authority. The Republic didn't demand fealty from its subjects because people feared their power or depended on their security forces. The Republic's strength came from its ability to harness the free market and use it to expand its borders and bring prosperity to the galaxy. Everyone wanted a piece of the Republic dream and naturally aligned themselves with its economic ambition. One of the key identifiers of an advanced economy is industrial specialization, or the hyper-concentration of resources, knowledge, and skill in just a handful of producers. This allows these producers to manufacture a large amount of high-quality goods at a relatively cheap price thanks to scaling and efficiency. This, in turn, significantly increases the buying power of the average citizen and allows them access to technology and tools that they otherwise would not be able to afford. For instance, when Corellian Engineering Corporation decided to churn out cheap, affordable freighters that the average middle-class family could afford, that significantly increases the power and mobility of those middle-class families, giving them opportunity to start businesses or travel to new areas where they have more room to grow and expand. Advancements in droid technology led to the creation of astromechs that could input navigational data that prior to this only large capital ship navigational computers could handle. Giving the average person access to a freighter and an astromech significantly changed how migration patterns worked in the galaxy and led to an unprecedented era of growth and expansion. And for all of this to work, well, the transportation network, the hyperspace lanes, have to be stabilized. Companies like Corellian Engineering Corporation are able to churn out sub 100,000 credit freighters because they most likely take advantage of the lower cost of labor and land values in the Outer Rim. By the late Republic period, the world of Corellia and the surrounding systems are probably devoid of substantial mineral deposits and resources. Most companies like Corellian Engineering Corporation that had manufacturing presence in the core regions most likely just assembled their premium ships in this area, where, they could use their higher cost labor because the margins for these ships were going to be a lot wider. They could still make a good profit. We're talking about ships like the CR-90 Blockade Runner, which is more luxurious and usually used by diplomats and politicians. But the mining of raw durasteel, or the mining of lawmite for transparent steel, that happens in the peripherals of the galaxy on worlds like Lothal or Iradu. The vendors that process these raw materials and create components like hull plating are more likely to exist in the Middle Rim. The expansion region is home to more advanced manufacturers that specialize in reactor technology, shield generators, weapons emplacements. They are on the higher end of the value chain when it comes to starship manufacturing, but they are all connected to one another. And this all works really well because the hyperspace lanes to and from Corellia are well developed, and sometimes it takes less than a day to ship a component from across the galaxy to Corellia, which is probably just as fast as going to the far ends of the Corellian solar system at sublight speeds. And so even if CEC could open a small durasteel mining operation in the local system, it'll never be cheaper than their massive planet-wide operations in the Outer Rim. The Republic's style of governance was pretty hands-off, and so they relied heavily on advanced capital markets to do everything, from expanding the size of the Republic to laying down all the infrastructure needed to, sustain all that growth. And so let's take a look at these hyperspace lanes. What makes them possible? Hyperspace travel is a really interesting phenomenon because it actually occurs in another dimension. In this dimension, objects can travel faster than the speed of light by many times, allowing for almost instantaneous travel over extremely long distances. The only limitation is that things in real space have gravitational shadows in hyperspace, and so if you can't fly through an area in real space, in hyperspace you're also going to run into trouble. And so hyperspace lanes are really just trajectories that are well documented and studied by surveyors and cleared of gravitational anomalies, and not actual roads or tunnels. And collisions in hyperspace are especially terrifying because they would take place at very, very high speeds. It can turn the smallest ship with the lowest mass into a massive comet able to destroy entire moons and crack planets open. During the High Republic period, there was an event known as the Great Hyperspace Disaster. It occurred after a large passenger liner was cut off by a Nile Marauder ship in hyperspace. The passenger liner attempted an extreme maneuver which ripped the vessel in half. This sent dozens of fragments of ship crashing to nearby speeds at FTL speeds. Millions of lives would be lost, and all hyperspace travel in the nearby sectors would be shut down. So as you can see, this is a process that is very risky, so it takes a lot of trial and error, mathematics, surveying to figure out properly, because if you do make a mistake, not only are the people on that ship going to die, it's very possible that those fragments of that ship can hit a population center and cause, really cataclysmic levels of death and destruction. Many of the ancient hyperspace lanes that were first used by the Republic were most likely adopted from the Rakan Infinite Empire, which preceded the Republic. The Rakans were a brutal barbarian race that used force power technology to build a massive armada, which they used to enslave the known galaxy with. They would seed the core region of the galaxy with life and connect all of their holdings with newly found hyperspace lanes. But the way the Rakans created hyperspace lanes was a bit different from the Republic. The Rakans were all force sensitive, so they heavily relied on the force to do their bidding. They didn't really use math or science to simply map out all the trajectories of gravitational anomalies and systems in the area. Instead, they utilized their force sensitives as almost guides or navigators to feel their way through hyperspace. They also had these force-sensitive slaves known as force hounds that were used to sniff out and find new planets with force users on it to conquer. This is actually a very common way for early civilization to basically safely travel FTL speeds. They use force users who are able to use their senses to kind of figure out where all of the dangers were. The Chiss who reside in the even more chaotic unknown region had no choice but to use force sensitives to find calmer paths in hyperspace. Traditional methods didn't really work in this part of the galaxy because there were just too many gravitational anomalies. There's actually rumored or there's like a theory that some ancient celestial race seeded this area of the galaxy with a lot of anomalies to create like a buffer between them and some kind of ancient evil. And so for much of early history, the Republic also depended on Jedi navigators, or during the High Republic period, you had Pathfinder teams from the Jedi Order who used the Force to safely feel out open and safe passages. But of course, this method can only be scaled up to a certain extent. There are only so many Force users in the galaxy, and definitely not enough to, place one Force user on every ship that is transporting people or goods or politicians or security forces. This was a huge limitation for galactic trade and transportation back in the day. Now, the most standard way of charting out hyperspace lanes was done by surveyors, ones employed by the Republic but also private individuals. And it was a very high risk and high reward process. The Santeca clan became famous and rich because they became hyperspace prospectors pretty early on in the Republic's growth period. It's even rumored that's how Dexter Jetzer got the seed money to purchase his diner on the surface of Coruscant. He also used to be a hyperspace prospector back in the day. Now, people didn't just seed lanes for the sake of exploration. There was usually some kind of mission or goal tied to the, opening of a new lane, usually some kind of resource node or some kind of treasure. In our past video, we talked about the Bespin system and Cloud City's Tabana mining operation. Cloud City's founder, Ecclesias Fig, understood the key to the success of his operation on Bespin was connecting Bespin to neighboring planets with new hyperspace lanes. You see, the speed of travel in the Star Wars galaxy wasn't just limited by physical space between two objects, it was limited by how many hyperspace jumps you had to make. More developed trade routes that date back to the Rakan Infinite Empire are very well established and allow ships to travel at very fast speeds for long periods of time to large hub systems, but once you get to the mid and outer rim, the jumps are more localized and oftentimes you can't find a direct jump to where you need to go, and so there's a lot of side and backtracking, which also leads to galactic dead ends like the Camino system, which made it a great place to hide the cloning projects. Of course, Camino stops being a dead end if you can find a new hyperspace route from it to another location that doesn't pass through, the Rishi Moon, which is where the existing route bottlenecks. And so the people who were prospecting new routes had to be incentivized by something. In those early days, it was the thought of establishing new colonies and new worlds. Later on, it became about finding new resources and minerals or finding new flora and fauna, new cultures to bring into the Republic. Oftentimes, the hyperspace lane's creation was funded by what was connected at the end of the lane. Again, for Fig, spending millions of credits to connect Bespin to new worlds was worth it because it overall increase the sale of Tabana gas. Hyperspace prospecting teams had to include astronomers who had a deep understanding of stars and ideally localized knowledge that took into account for any large migrations of celestial bodies in the area. You needed navigators who understood the local star charts, and test pilots who were brave enough to fly these essentially blind missions into unknown space. You also had statisticians who can create algorithms and model out the possibility of crashes. The safest way of doing this was first estimating the clearest path between point A and point B, and then just breaking down that path into smaller manageable chunks, at which point you can use your active sensors and as much navigational data as possible to basically make micro jumps within line of sight that are much lower risk. Of course, that means covering that full hyperspace lane you're trying to create could take hundreds if not thousands of micro jumps, but again, that's the only way you can do it without killing yourself. And so yeah, high risk, high reward. And then once you have your lane created, you still need to survey it constantly and adjust it as the galaxy naturally changes around it. I imagine in the late Republic period, most ships were giving live data to some central transportation agency so that if there were any major shifts in hyperspace lanes because of a supernova or because a star gets captured by another star, it could be detected before, a ship crashes into something. But this also means that hyperspace lanes need constant travel and usage to be considered safe. I'm sure after Jedha was cracked open by the Death Star, less trade and travel was reported to the system, and eventually that hyperspace lane just didn't have enough traffic to be considered safe because you no longer had up-to-date data on how stable everything was. The longer a hyperspace lane is continuously used, the more data there is about how safe it is. Maybe once in 1,000 years you have a bunch of comets pass through the lane, but these kind of events either need to be modeled out many years in advance or are discovered through experience. Now, another way you can cut down how many micro jumps you're doing while prospecting a lane is by using probe droids. They can do all the hard work for you. They can still test the stability of the path, and if you lose a probe, the cost is only in credits and not in life. It should be noted that later on in the New Republic's period, it seems like the First Order managed to develop some kind of supercomputer that had the ability to brute force calculate new hyperspace routes, or at least that's what I'm theorizing. This model seemed to incorporate just large amounts of data from everywhere. Ship logs, kind of weather satellites, deep space probes, basically anything, any data you can collect. They basically created a model of the entire galaxy. This computer is so powerful it could even predict where a ship is jumping based on its last known location and what trajectory it is facing. Such a technology in theory could create new hyperspace lanes wherever it goes and avoid existing bottlenecks. This might be why the First Order was able to take over the galaxy so quickly. It was able to appear over systems and circumvent defenses before they were even prepared. This idea is definitely novel, but it represents a new way of hyperspace travel. The only problem is the First Order are in charge of this technology, and they definitely are interested in building up the galactic economy and making transportation easier. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you later.